Innovation and creativity are central to entrepreneurship. But what happens when you go beyond the edge? The Frontier Entrepreneurship Podcast brings you the world's first, the disruptive, the avant-garde. We take you to the frontier in conversation with the entrepreneurs who are the forerunners of the industries of the future. Get to know their world with co-hosts Braden Kemp and Tracy Morningstar. Imagine you're driving down the highway in a classic Ford Mustang convertible. But instead of the rumble of a gas-powered engine, you're on a clean, silent run. The ride is electric, and you're at the frontier of a full-on automotive re-engineering.
Today, we're taking you to the frontier with ARC Motor Company in Peterborough, Ontario. Sloane Paul, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me. Really excited to be here.
It's great to have you. I have a little bit of personal story time, and then I'll give you my first question for you. I'm really excited for this conversation because I'm a bit of a gearhead. My grandfather and his brother owned a race team, gas station, an auto shop. My dad spent his childhood bouncing around from racetrack to racetrack.
Wow.
All over Canada and the U.S. And so since I was a kid, I've been tinkering around with mechanical things, and I personally can't resist the sound of an internal combustion engine. So I'm looking to gain some perspective on EVs today. But my first question for you is not about the technology. I'm interested to know how an award-winning marketing professional with experience at major tech companies finds herself in an auto shop in Peterborough, Ontario.
This is a question I actually asked myself a few times, trading in my loafers for steel-toed boots. I'm like, what am I doing here? But, it started because I have a passion for classic cars that was actually built through the pandemic. I used to watch car restoration shows because it was just like something that was really relaxing when we were like all locked in the house. And then I started purchasing these project cars. So basically my love is like the classic Ford Bronco from like 1966 to 1977, right? So those are the first gen Broncos that I absolutely love them. So I started buying them. I used to go on Kijiji and Facebook and buy them. And then I was restoring one, in the process of restoring one with a shop. Obviously, I'm not a mechanical genius or anything like that, but I had a shop working on it. I was like, there has to be a more sustainable way of doing this, other than restoring the engines and the carbs and things like that. What can I do? So I did a lot of research around it. There wasn't a lot of electric conversion companies available or in business in Canada. So I saw this as an opportunity. My brother is a electrical engineer with his Eng, and he's worked at Toyota and Rolls-Royce. So he's worked with as a consultant, actually. So he has that background. I was like, let's do something different. We've been working for many years for other people. Let's take a bet on ourselves and dive right into something that, can really change things around, especially from an environmental standpoint. But, as your love for the sound of engines and everything like that goes, it's a different driving experience that I hope that you'll be able to see when we have our first Bronco converted. So that's how I got into it.
That's fantastic. It's a great story. Was there a part of that? Did you feel like it was time to leave that corporate world behind? Were you thinking in that direction anyways, or was it sort of an off the wall decision?
I was kind of thinking that way too, because, I've worked on the local markets, I've worked in the global markets leading teams, and, you're basically, if you're looking at a promotion, you're looking at going higher up. There's a lot of sacrifices that you have to make, especially with your time and your energy and everything like that. And, I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit. Like I started like a snow shoveling business when I was 10 years old, and it started from that. And I thought to myself, it's time to do something new, do something that you can own and take ownership of. And yeah, that's how it generally started. But, I'm really grateful for the corporate world and everything that they've taught me and everything that they've done to invest in me as a professional. But I thought it was time to go, trying to do something new.
So ARC Motor Company, how does the name come around, and where are you at with it now?
Right, ARC Motor Company. So it's funny because as a marketer, I had so many ideas. I'm like, what about this and what about that? And my engineers are just like, I don't like it. And I was like, okay. And, people are everything, and you want to make sure that everybody's aligned to your mission, especially as the core group of like 3 people. So ARC is an idea or a name that our mechanical engineer came up with our electrical engineer. And they were just like, ARC sounds like a really cool name. And it really does mean a lot in the engineering field, where it's basically the jump off point from one point to the other for electricity. So it just makes this beautiful blue arc. And that's how it came to be.
That's awesome. That makes perfect sense.
I'm sure you're surrounded by a fantastic team, just whether it's large or small, with new and emerging technology, especially in EV. What kind of challenges did you experience in training or upgrading your mechanics or yourself in becoming the new avant-garde of classic EV automobiles?
I'm not a technical savant. Like I work around technology. I understand technology, but I can't actually do the work myself. So in order for this all to happen, it was just like kismet having my brother, who is like also an entrepreneur as well, come in with his, background in electrical engineering, and also working across the nuclear industry and as well as construction. But nuclear is a really good point, because that is another source of energy that, that the experts or savants are looking into for our vehicles. So yeah, having a team with me to be able to tell me what the technology is and what is up and coming has been great. In terms of like upskilling, I will say, for electrical vehicles, we've had some really great partners from the US who have been in this field a little longer. When I was doing research, I would say a year and a half ago, there was a company called Moment Motors, and I just loved what they were doing. And it was a great brand, caught my eye immediately, working on iconic cars and converting them. And I just reached out to the CEO and I was like, can you have a chat? And so we had a chat about it all. And he's just like, just make sure that before you start a business, take out a HELOC. And I did, and I'm so glad I did that. But it's been great. We have other partners in the US that we work with, like, for parts that we need that aren't available in Canada, upcycle Tesla batteries. They are the savants, and we are learning from them. We've also worked with Legacy EV, who are the, I would say, the leading industry experts right now, who are helping us with our prototype by being consultants. So, it's, I think in the area of entrepreneurism, you definitely need to have people who have had experience or knowledge in the area that you're trying to get into to help you out, because it really takes a team. It takes a village to do something like this, especially from a technical standpoint in a field that's still so green with technology.
You mentioned iconic cars, and the Gen 1 Bronco certainly is one. Many cars of that era are. Who are the buyers for this category of car that's always been seen as, the 60s through the 70s with that muscle car era? Who is the buyer for a muscle car that's been converted to an EV?
I would say people, okay, when you said it was like during the 60s and 70s, so yeah, these cars were not fancy back then. They were like $2,000, $3,000. Right now, we're basically foraging for them in fields where they used to be snowplows, right? So like, who's paying $200,000 for a restored classic Ford Bronco with a gas engine, with an ICE combustion, like whole setup, and then tacking on another $150,000 for EVs? it's somebody who is very affluent, in doing our market research or audience research and building out our key audiences. It's definitely somebody who's affluent, who's like a millennial who, really appreciates and loves classic cars, preserving history and the iconic cars like the Ford Bronco. But somebody who is on trends as well, because the Ford Bronco has just skyrocketed in prices, from being 5 years ago, $15,000 for a running car to $15,000, just a complete rust bucket.
What stage is the company at today, and what is that 10-year North Star that you're after?
So we're still in the startup stage. We're still in the startup stage now, as we have, we're very fortunate enough to get funding from your organization, which we're really grateful for, to help us get the seed funding for the Bronco itself. So the Bronco is completely built right now. It is just a beautiful machine. It just takes you back to like the old days with, the modern amenities of what you see now. What I was saying is that the Ford Bronco itself, like, it is in movies, it's in Yellowstone, it's in everywhere. Every celebrity has one. You can see them in the paparazzi, in the magazines and things like that. But it looks exactly like that. It's a beautifully built machine. We are currently right now just getting all the parts together. We're bench testing all the parts. 10 years from now, wow, that's long. Like, even thinking about 5 years is still a stretch for me. In terms of where the industry is going with EV sales, I think that, we're not stopping. It's still early days. Like Deloitte, I was reading an article by Deloitte saying that by 2030, 50% of vehicles will be EVs. I'm hoping that a lot of those vehicles will be converted or retrofitted or electrified. I'm hoping that by that point in time that we'll be able to create our own IPs, create our own technology that really contributes to the EV industry. But, everybody has a starting point right now. But even in the next 2 to 3 years, you're getting promises from municipalities about retrofitting buses and fleets. So as soon as we can really just come in and, sort all the kinks and make sure that our classic car business is doing really well and thriving, we'll be able to take the resources and the brain power and put it into how do we create like skateboards and, just drop a bus on that, or, how do we work with, let's say the Peterborough city of Peterborough to electrify their fleet. So that's upcoming. And it's just, I hope that it doesn't stop. And I hope that we do reach that 10-year mark of driving innovation and, creating a lot of really cool stuff.
You haven't mentioned this, but what if I had a used vehicle like a Mustang? Would it be something that I could do is just bring it into your shop, and from there, have a discussion, and it's something that you're able to do for me?
Yeah, for sure. Well, we have the discussion first. Like, what is it you're trying to achieve? What shape your car is in? Because conversions are not cheap. Like, they start off at like $65,000, right? For a full conversion. And that's like with a model like a Volkswagen Beetle, like something smaller, or even a Porsche where, they've been electrified many times. You can easily do that. The knowledge is out there, right? But we definitely need to talk about your Mustang. We'll have to review your Mustang to make sure that it's, fit for conversion. Does it have disc brakes? Does it have power steering? Does it have the things that's going to be able to handle the torque? And also, it can't be like a rust machine because you are investing so much money into it. It has to be in pristine shape. So that's when we have the conversation. My engineers will make sure that, and my mechanical team will make sure that it's fit for a conversion before we can move ahead with it.
You mentioned that you enjoy traveling. Is there an EV automobile that you are sort of visualizing that you want to take on a road trip?
Is it biased to say the Bronco?
Not at all.
To say the Bronco. I also love the Porsche 356 convertibles. I think that just driving on the highway across Canada, hitting up mountains and just pulling the top down and seeing that, it's very idyllic, maybe even corny. That's absolutely something. That's my next dream vehicle that I keep telling my team. I'm like, we're going to do a Porsche next.
And then you're going to have to let it go.
And then I had to let it go because it's expensive.
Yeah, absolutely. So I imagine that you've come across all sorts of challenges in any startup. We all face them. Are there any sort of big hurdles or stumbling blocks you've either already cleared and didn't expect, or any in the future that you do expect?
From a business standpoint, I think because it's so green, like you really have to go into detail about what you're doing. For instance, it was really hard for us to find a space for us to do what we do because landlords were scared of fires or contamination or anything, because they didn't really have an understanding that it actually is the cleanest thing that you can do in an auto shop, like in an auto space. So it was really difficult for us to get a space, but we were able to work with an amazing realtor. And, we just had a landlord take a bet on us. And then we were able to get the space that we're in now. Although we will have to grow because it's quite tiny. I think another thing is just, working with the infrastructure of, once you have your vehicle, working with insurance companies and saying, hey, this is converted. And then the insurance companies want to take the risk on you. Fortunately, we have a partner that we work with that I've already got insurance for our Ford Bronco. So our clients are in good hands when that comes to be, because I've already gone through all the hurdles that they're going to have to go through, and I'll definitely make sure that it's a smooth process. And then like from an entrepreneurial standpoint, going into the frontier of, for me, which is new as a marketer, as a woman, as a person of color, going into I was going to say breaking through into the world of automotive, especially classic automotive, which is typically dominated by, middle-aged white cis men, was a little bit more difficult for me, I would say, because at the very beginning, when I was looking for the Broncos that I was telling you about, the very beginning, that they would see my profile and not respond to me. They wouldn't respond to me. But then I asked my friend, who was a white cis man, to message down on Facebook, and they would respond immediately, because, the knowledge of me, the possibility of me not having the knowledge needed to successfully negotiate for a Bronco was not perceived by the other partner. So, that was a little bit of a hurdle. That was something that was a little hard to swallow, but you have to work with the system. I actually had I had to create a profile and have my brother's name on it just so that I could get a response. But that's different. That's in like, I'm trying to acquire a classic vehicle that you've had on your lot for 50 years. That's just, rotted to the core. But when it comes to like the innovation, the electric vehicle portion of it, right, the high stakes area, I've had nothing but great support and help from our partners. Everyone that I've reached out to doesn't even care, just talks to me like an individual. So I guess there's some areas in the automotive world where it's a little bit backwards, but there's other areas that, you're really glad that you came into this world, the automotive, the EV world, because there's so much to learn, and there's people who are so open. They all just want to see you succeed. It's
unfortunate, but not surprising to me that you had that experience on the buying side. But it's great to hear that that's not an experience that you're having on the technology and the marketing of the business and part.
Right, business side of it. Yeah.
Also, I think you had talked about your mother, and they played a role in the mentorship of giving you those tools to be able to tackle those difficult situations.
Yeah, for sure. I think adversity is like my best friend now, instead of just being like a challenge. My mom, she escaped the war that was in Cambodia to come to Canada, had my brothers and I, raised us to be good citizens, I would say, not tooting my own horn. So, she has been a great mentor, a great support, a great friend, somebody that I always look to for any advice that I need. And it doesn't even matter if it's like just business related or even just like life related. She's there for me.
You mentioned that leadership is, so as we see this shift to EVs, which I think is, as you mentioned, going to continue. There are going to be companies that are leaders in that space. There are going to be companies that people look up to in that space. The who in the EV world does Linda have her eyes on?
A few years ago. Well, with the whole Elon Musk thing, I think it's still relevant to say that he really did a great job of putting EVs at the forefront with such a premium brand and incredible software that they were the leaders in the industry for well over a decade, right? And I think they still are. But, from my perspective, they're like a tech company, right? I think the leaders right now are, the companies who do auto well, like who really build incredible machines and then come in and add incredible components to make it an incredible EV machine. And I'll use incredible more. I'm sorry about that. But it's just incredible. Like, for instance, I think Volvo was really good. They're really great. Just a couple of weeks ago, they released their XE90, which was their all-electric biggest SUV. And I've had the luxury of being able to test drive their electric vehicles. And I think that they're amazing at like safety, at luxury, at comfort. And it's like an understated luxury, but now that they have their hybrid offering, which is incredible, they just keep getting longer and longer with range. And they also have their XE90, which I hope that will just take off. They're doing well. Like, it's just, Swedish engineering, it's just incredible in design. Another one I think is Rivian. Rivian actually is a company that just came full force with just EVs. And their SUVs are, is it SUVs or trucks? I think
it's a pickup, I think, yeah.
Yeah, it's a Rivian pickup truck. So when I was looking at the Lightning versus a Rivian, I really like the Rivian as well. But Ford is just a company that has been building, the most popular pickup trucks, the F-150, for the longest time. Like this, it has to be incredible with electric components in it. Rivian, I think, is really cool. Still has some work to do. I think that they've had to let go a few people, few employees, but I think that if they keep at it, they'll build some incredible machines. So definitely them. And who else is doing Hyundai? So Hyundai is not like something that you would see as a premium machine, right? You think of it as it's like mid-market vehicles, but their Ioniq, like series of electric vehicles, looking at all the reviews, it's just like one of the best out there at a really good price point. So electric vehicles don't have to be super expensive or super luxurious to be incredible and safe. Like Hyundai is doing a really good job of it. So if anybody is looking for something that's our mid-tier market, definitely the Ioniq is a great machine. And I also had the luxury of driving an Ioniq machine. And I would say they're more premium brand. The brand is escaping me. Do you remember the premium brand Genesis? Genesis, coming out with their GV70, I believe. Next year, it's rolling out like a January or something, and they have had stellar reviews, and it's they're really going over the top with their design as well. They have like a crystal ball as like part of their gear shift, which is really cool. But yeah, I would say those are the companies that I think that I definitely have an eye on when it comes to EVs and seeing what they're planning to do. And one more thing. Let's not forget about GM. GM is doing a lot of work into producing lithium ion batteries, right? So they have a huge commitment by 2030. They're teaming up with some really cool tech firms in the metals area to sustainably mine lithium ion batteries, or the metals are used for them, like lithium, graphite, cobalt. Don't quote me, I'm not a scientist. But they're doing some really great work to make sure that they're not just touting that EVs are sustainable, but every part of it is sustainable.
And I think the sustainability part of this, I mean, we've got these pressures of climate change and decarbonization.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see the ARC project in part as a way to leave your mark on that sustainability and decarbonization program, or is it purely a passion for vehicles and for electrification?
That's an interesting question. So for me personally, I know what my audience wants, right? Like to go out there and I would say amplify the message of, hey, be more sustainable, electrify your car. It's only going to cost minimum $65,000. A lot of people will be, hey, I can get a Nissan Leaf for less than that, and I can drive my car every day of the year versus my classics, which are pretty preserved for like the summer, right? But then what you want to tap into is the passion point. So the passion point of, hey, this is a family heirloom. It's been passed down from family to family to family. And in order for you to be able to operate this vehicle by 2040, I believe is the deadline for zero emission vehicles in Canada, then, another option would be to electrify it and preserve this for future generations. So for me, I love the fact that it's a passion project, but I also think that it can make a mark on the, our goals with zero emission vehicles or net zero emissions by, 2040. Because right now we're going to get in there, and what we need to think about is scaling up. Right? So we can do one car. It's going to take 2 to 3 months to electrify a car, to engineer everything. But then, it's going to take another 2 to 3 months to electrify a car. So that's, in terms of scale, that's really not going to be a lot. But when we look at, okay, well, let's become the experts of this, and we can do it with our eyes closed, then it's time to look at seeing how we can scale it, which I, mentioned about working with fleets and working with like retrofitting buses in the future, because then you can go at it at mass. And then from that, I hope that it makes a huge, huge imprint on the sustainability with vehicles when we start thinking about, okay, well, what can we do to really streamline it to make it better, or to make it smaller, make it more denser in terms of parts, and start looking at inventing our own technology.
Is social media something that you're looking at?
Oh, yeah. Social media is this. There was the very start of my marketing career. I was appointed the digital lead at a film company that I was working at just right out of university, because I was the only one who knew how to use social media at that time. It was way, way back in the day. So definitely we'll have a social presence from an organic and also as well as a paid perspective. So we will be there.
Well, Linda, you got me thinking there on the scaling of this project. And I wonder, there are people who see in agriculture, for example, that, maybe the big giant industrialized farm isn't the future of the solution of the future. Maybe smaller hubs of agriculture are the solution of the future. Do you see an opportunity in this retrofitting space? Because it's not something I had considered, but we have these, millions and billions of vehicles on the road, and we need to find a way to decarbonize that process. We can't just throw them all in the landfill. So naturally, it makes sense then to retrofit them for electric. Do you see an opportunity for a distributed model of smaller shops like yours, rather than one big giant Tesla, to electrify those existing cars?
So that's a really interesting question. It's something that I actually think about a lot, right? When I think about scaling up. So I think that it can go both ways. So there is a few shops like ours around the world. Like, for instance, you have Jaunt Motors in Australia, right? You have Zero EV in the UK. You have Moment Motors, who are all just like small shops, like let's say they do 10 to 15 cars a year, right? But they do it really well and with a small team. But they can also scale. Like, for instance, Zero EV in the UK, as well as Jaunt Motors in Australia, have actually merged so that they have more of a footprint, right? But they're still small shops, but they just have more of a footprint. So it's kind of like a franchise model, but not really, right? It's still managed by the individuals who have started those companies. So I think that can work really well. But then you have you heard of Luna's Designs?
No, I haven't.
So Luna's Designs is I would say like the Tesla of electric conversions. So they actually have David Beckham as one of the investors. And they started I believe in a few years ago with about 13 employees. And just this year, they are building other factories and they have at least 400 employees now. And they're basically like they do Rolls Royces, they do Range Rovers, and whatever is as luxurious as possible. That's what they do. And they're like more the Teslas about it. And they actually just started Lunaz.tech, which is, they're creating like a transport truck, basically like a semi, on their own platform, which is really cool. So we can go either way. I'd be happy to do it. I'd be happy if we were just really successful in our own shop, small team, doing really well and succeeding. But we have to constantly be innovating. Like that is the thing that really drives me is innovation, right? Or I'd be really happy to have something like Lunaz, which would be killer because you're making more of you have a bigger footprint because you're not only just working with, let's say, end consumers, but you're working with government as well and also corporations.
Thank you for coming on the show and sharing your experience and insight. Very, very informative.
We'll be right back after this short break.
Locally, NCFDC delivers FedDev Ontario's Community Futures program, providing up to $250,000 in financing for qualifying businesses located in Northumberland County. Lending solutions by NCFDC support business startup, stabilization, or expansion. Head to ncfdc.ca/loans for more information and to apply today.
We return to the Frontier Entrepreneurship Podcast with co-hosts Braden Kemp and Tracy Morningstar.
One of the things that I'm finding as we do these interviews is their ability to speak truth, and as it relates to innovation, because these are world challenges and they're taking on a huge project, which is, their business. And they're following through with it, and they have all the energy and motivation, and I love that.
You make a good point there. When you just stand back and look at most startups or most innovative new businesses, it can look like why on earth does this person think that they can take on this massive challenge? For those of us who aren't entrepreneurs, and I find myself kind of half in, half out of the world of being an entrepreneur, I can sometimes be the person who comes up with that big idea. And the other side of my brain says, you're crazy. Don't go after that big idea. You can't do that. I'm always really impressed by people who are truly entrepreneurs. And they either don't have that little voice in the back of their head that says, are you nuts? Or they do have it and they just don't listen to it. Whatever the case may be. So it's always something I'm impressed by.
I'm Tracy Morningstar.
And I'm Braden Kemp.
We'll see you next time on the Frontier Entrepreneurship Podcast.
This edition of the Frontier Entrepreneurship Podcast was made possible with the support of FedDev Ontario and the Government of Canada. Special thanks to Victoria Pichler. The executive producer of Frontier Entrepreneurship is Robert Washburn. I'm John Hayden. To find out more, head to our website, ncfdc.ca. That's ncfdc.ca. Thanks for listening.